We know that there's a high correlation between people who do sports and their self-efficacy skills, which really just means self-determination. So how can we use that information in order to make better people? That's one of the questions that Dr. Lauren Lieberman asked herself over 30 years ago before creating Camp Abilities. Now, this is an incredible camp for people with visual impairments that you may or may not have heard about. You're going to get to learn about that today in our podcast episode. She is joined by her colleague, Ben Lytle, who has come alongside her to do some research to see if having interns at Camp Abilities actually produces good orientation and mobility specialists, and you might actually be surprised at the results. If you have anything to do with people with visual impairments, or you're just a teacher who wants to understand a little bit about how movement works and how you might be able to get involved with cool camps that work with students with visual impairments, you definitely do not want to miss this episode. Welcome to the podcast, you guys. I'm so grateful that you are here with us. We have Lauren Lieberman and Ben Lytle. Will you please introduce yourselves to our community?
Sure. I'm Lauren Lieberman, and I'm a distinguished service professor at SUNY Brockport, and I teach in the kinesiology, sports studies, and physical education department. And my area is adapted physical education. And my focus since undergrad has been on teaching children with visual impairment, blindness, deafblindness, and deafness. And I started my career at the Perkins School for the Blind in the deafblind program. I was a physical education teacher, swimming coach, and I just love it. And when I started at SUNY Brockport, I noticed that we didn't have any students with visual impairments or deafblindness in our practicums. So I started Camp Abilities, which is a sports camp for children with visual impairments. And now we have camps all over the world. And it's been a great journey, and I get to meet some amazing people and work with amazing people. And I just want to thank Cassie for having me on this show.
And my name is Benjamin Lytle. I am a teacher for students with visual impairments and a certified orientation mobility specialist. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. I currently work for Lincoln Public Schools. This is my 14th year as an educator. I have been a comms now this will be the start of my 5th year. So I have been a TSVI for much longer, but have amazing opportunities to work with wonderful, wonderful students. It's been a phenomenal journey for sure. I'm actually currently working on my PhD through the University of Nebraska. I will be actually starting my dissertation here very, very soon. I have a huge passion for assistive technology, and I would say more specific to pre-service teachers, pre-service TSVIs. But obviously that AT piece, I would say, encompasses a wide array of things. So not just teachers of students with visual impairments, but obviously the implications for comms as well is very relevant. And so definitely have a huge passion for that. And I'm just excited to see where things go. And more than anything, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience getting to work with Lauren and all of the amazing things that she has done. We were actually, not to get off track, but with the Camp Abilities piece, we actually just recently got back from Iceland and were able to set up a brand new Camp Abilities there, which is so incredible. And it was such an amazing opportunity. So I cannot say enough good about all the work that she has done. But more than that, Cassie, thank you as well for having us on the show. This is a wonderful thing that you have done as well to put together. So thank you.
Oh, it's my joy and my passion, and I love being able to bridge the gap between service providers and you guys, and kind of like bring us up to your level in conversation and bring you down to our level in conversation. That is my absolute favorite. Okay, you guys have already said things that I'm like, wait, what? That's so cool. Okay, Lauren, we're going to start with you. When you went from Perkins to becoming a professor, what was it that made you want to become a professor? And like, how was that challenge in stepping into that new role?
That is a great question. Well, so I was at Perkins School for the Blind, and right out of my master's program, I only wanted to work at a school for the blind or a school for the deaf. I really wanted to work with kids with sensory impairments, and it was perfect because Perkins had the deaf-blind program. And I was getting calls all the time from parents, from teachers. And they think the kicker was, and I'm not going to say which school, actually it's closed now, I can say it. The Oregon School for the Blind, the PE teacher called me and asked me, this is before the internet and everything. He's like, how do you teach kids who are blind how to run? I'm like, dude, you're at a school for the blind. How do you not know how to teach kids who are blind how to run? And I had been asked to do a lot of presentations and workshops. And so then I started taking classes at Oregon State, and like Perkins pays at the time, I think they still do, pay for your graduate classes. If you've worked there a year, they'll pay for your graduate classes. And so I was taking some classes at Boston College, and then I was going to Oregon State in the summers and taking classes there, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but I wanted to continue my education. And so I was thinking, and I started like doing a lot more presentations and workshops. And I did a study one summer as part of my class. And I thought, I could reach a lot more people if I had my doctorate. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do afterwards, but I knew I really wanted to get my doctorate. And Oregon State had a government grant to pay for my whole PhD and pay me every month. I would get a stipend. Actually, a lot of my friends from when I taught there are still there. And I went and did my doctorate because I thought I could reach more people. How is this person at the School for the Blind in Oregon? They don't know how to teach kids how to run. Imagine all these people all over the country and all the kids that are missing these opportunities, because that was when more and more kids were getting placed into inclusive settings and nobody knew what to do. And so if you look at the Campabilities website right now, I have done what I set out to do. I mean, there are so many videos and tip sheets and manuals about how do you teach kids with visual impairment and deaf blindness. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I think if I stayed at Perkins, I could have still reached a lot of people. I mean, they have an amazing outreach. I think now doing what I'm doing, and I'm actually still working with Perkins in various capacities. So, I feel like I have the best of both worlds.
Man, that's so incredible to think that you had this idea, right? But not only that, you believed in yourself. And it seems like you felt this responsibility because you could have stayed where you were. It sounds like you had a great life working at Perkins. Your bills were paid. You could keep going to school, further your education. Boston is not a bad place. The people who work at Perkins, not bad people, like perfect little life. You could have stayed there. And I feel akin to this a little bit, where not a little bit, a lot, where I feel like, wait a minute, I have this knowledge and these people need this information. It's my responsibility to figure out how to get it to them in a way that they can understand it and that I know that they'll listen to me. So getting your PhD was a very hard path. Congratulations. But a path to do so. And you allowed yourself to step into that future version of yourself and go through those challenges. I'm sure it was so hard. I'm sure some days you wanted to quit. And I'm sure that then when you decided to start Campabilities, same thing, like you're starting something from scratch that probably did not exist at all. And so you're creating a brand new path and not just disrupting a market, but creating something completely brand new. And then you have to go and market this thing that you created and get other people to see your vision and to buy into your vision. Ben, I do want to circle you back around in a second, but I'm curious, Lauren, how did that starting Campabilities, right? You have your PhD. I don't know when you started working at SUNY, but then like you started Campabilities. What were those early years at Campabilities like? Was it like super scrappy? Was it like, just get it done, just get it out? Or was it like, no, I have a plan. I have all my ducks in a row. And
well, you brought up a good point in that having a doctorate, it's sad to say, I would go to a school district and the teachers would be saying something. I come in and say the same thing, and then they would listen to me. And so it did give me more of a voice having a PhD and also having worked at Perkins. I mean, Perkins is like having another degree on your resume. I mean, I learned more at Perkins than I did in any degree I've ever had. It's just an amazing place with amazing specialists, and the kids were my best teachers, obviously. I taught one of my kids who's deafblind how to ride a unicycle. And that, talk about mobility. Yeah, he was a tactile signer, and it's on YouTube. If you put in unicycle and deafblind, it'll come up. You'll see him, Eddie. Anyway, but my point is, so like, yeah, I got, it was 1995. 1995. There's no internet. There was no cell phones. And I had this idea, like I had to change. And this is not something I had a choice. Like I know that I was put here to do this work. And so I get to Brockport, and someone said to me, "Oh, it was a grant. I went to a grant workshop." And she said, "What's your dream? Like, what do you want to do? And like, what can we get money for?" I said, "I want to start a camp for kids who are blind," because I grew up going to camp, and that was like a huge part of my life. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to start a camp for kids who are blind. And then I got, I think it was $13,000, which was a lot of money at the time. And so then I just reached out, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, there was one sports camp at Michigan State, no, Western Michigan University. And I reached out to them, but theirs was an elite camp. Like the kids already had to know how to play goal ball. They already had to be able to run. Mine was an educational sports camp. We meet the kids where they are. So it was the first of its kind. And I got a lot of good support from Paul Ponchilia. You might know Paul. He was a professor at Western Michigan, and I just finished a book with him, our second edition of our PE and sport book. And so that first year, it was like, I mean, I didn't have a one-to-one. Some of the kids wandered away. I mean, I knew what I was doing related to like the sports and instruction, but like the logistics of one-to-one, I mean, there were so many things I didn't know. But then people started hearing about it and sending kids to me from other states. And at one point, I had like 6 kids from Connecticut, and I was turning kids away from New York, like down the street, and kids from Texas and Alaska and Wisconsin and Massachusetts. I can't service every child. I mean, it's 1 week, and I'm only one person. And so I started saying, no, I'll help you, but you need to start your own camp. I can't serve all the kids. So the first expansion camp was in Alaska, and they got a lot of money. I brought 10 friends and family up to Alaska to start that camp. And they still have that camp in Alaska. That was like 2000. I want to say it was 2000. And then we did another one in Texas and Maryland, Connecticut, and Florida. And then when we started going to other countries, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and now, I mean, like Ben said, Iceland, we're doing Bangladesh in December. I mean, it's just been an amazing ride, and just seeing kids who had never had opportunities to move, to run, to play sports, to swim. It's just been a great journey.
Oh my gosh. This story is absolutely incredible. It sounds like you started scrappy. Go ahead.
I wrote a book about it if you're interested. It's called The Campabilities Story, and it's available through SUNY Press. Yeah. And so, because everybody asked me, like, what made you start Campabilities? I'm like, it's a really long story. And the journey is just incredible. Like the lessons I learned along the way. And so I wrote a book about it, and it's through SUNY Press. So I can share that with everybody.
Yeah, we'll post all the links, and I'll get with you, Lauren, after this to get all the links and all the things that we're talking about, because it's quite a few. And of course, you wrote a book about it. So, Ben, you are also getting your doctorate. Do you also feel like this sense of responsibility to step into something bigger? Is that one of the reasons why you're getting your doctorate? Talk to me about your journey, and then we'll talk about how you guys came together.
Absolutely. That's honestly another really good question. So I'm going to answer this in kind of 2 parts. So to be completely honest with you, first and foremost, it was more of, I don't want to say a bucket list, but more of a, like, can I do this? Is really kind of, I would say, the focal point for starting my PhD. I feel like it's one of those things where obviously having a terminal degree like that has been something that's kind of always been on my radar, but I think finding obviously the right fit, the right program, all of those things definitely were very, very important as well. And I feel like even beyond that, just being a lifelong learner has always been just something. In fact, a lot of my colleagues tease me that I'll be in school until I retire. And so it's definitely one of those things I have such a love and passion for learning. And so I would say that's been my biggest drive more than anything. However, the other part to this, and I think to answer your question, and I know Lauren's definitely talked a lot about this too, but I think the further that I get into like the research aspect of things and my time that I had at camp this past summer, just being immersed in the unknown, right? Working through these different projects and ideas that whether it's a university professor has or really anybody that has ideas about things to let's try to take on something new. The idea of research, which I never thought that I would like even rewind 3 years ago when I started this program, research was something that was very scary to me just because it's not something I've done a lot of, to be completely honest. And so, but the further that I've gone through my program, I've really, really grown to love just the research aspect of it and learning new things and being able to, more than anything, obviously the learning aspect is crucial, but then sharing that, right? And so like the project that we did this past summer, being able to impart that wisdom, because that particular project was specific to uh, the ACVREP hours for internship students that are going through programs right now. And I think that the more that we look at things, and again, the research or the lack of research often that we don't have, I think being presented with those opportunities has just been a really, really cool aspect. And again, getting to work with amazing people is definitely an added bonus to that as well. But without talking necessarily in circles, I guess the other piece that I would just mention, and I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but the assistive technology piece, that was kind of the other part to pursuing my PhD, because again, it's something that even going all the way back at the start of my career, I would say even while I was getting my master's degree, technology has always been something that I've had such a love and a passion for. I started actually as a fifth grade teacher here in Lincoln at the very, very beginning of my career, still with Lincoln Public Schools. But technology is always something that I've tried to embed in a meaningful way within my teaching. And so I think that's kind of always been at the forefront of my mind as far as a way that I can continue to pursue, again, my love of learning, but working in a meaningful way toward that terminal degree.
Yeah, well, go do a bunch of research on AT. I know you are, I didn't hear caddis in there, but I don't care. I want the information.
I had thought about that actually at one point. That was going to be a potential stepping stone, but I was like, I need to just keep on going. So
I have a feeling that once your degree is finished, you could just add on. It's just another certificate. I mean, why not? No,
right.
just be one of those people that has like all the letters of the alphabet behind their name.
So Dr. Mackenzie Saviano, she's the professor at University of Nebraska. She was my professor for the vision program, and she teases me too. She said, "You're just going to be a collector of all these endorsements. You're just going to have all the things."
I mean, why not? But one thing that's interesting in our profession is that when you do go and you look back on like the studies, right? A big portion of them are still relying on the data from the 90s. And like that's great, but it's really nice to see this surge of new PhD people. You're probably in class with Katie Erickson, who's also there. I'm just one of my good friends in Arizona just got her PhD, and I love seeing, maybe it's because I'm about to be 40, right? And I have a new look on. I'm like, okay, maybe I will read that AER article, or like maybe we do need this data. Whereas before I was like, I don't care about your numbers, I just want your strategies. But as I get older, I'm like, okay, give me the white paper. Like, thank you for doing that work. We appreciate you guys.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, right? Because that's ultimately what my dissertation will focus on. There was a study that was done in 2008. Dr. Derek Smith, who is a well-renowned comms, and he developed there's 111 assistive technology competencies. But again, to your point, I mean, we're knocking on the door of almost 20 years ago when he did that. And with the onset of like chat GPT, AI, all of the, I mean, and not only that, you have students, I mean, it wasn't this way when I was a kid. I mean, you have kids that are using Chromebooks and all of these different things to access their education.
Or just random questions.
Right. Oh,
Like
absolutely.
the things that my children, like, little boys talk, right? Little boy talk. And then they said some real inappropriate things. And my kid went to Google it. And we were like, oh, no, we haven't set up the parental controls for that. Like, I'm so sorry, but we're gonna have to like reel this back, and we're also not gonna tell you what that other little boy said or what it means or why you got in trouble. So there's like an onslaught of new skills, because now the big skills that I think students need to have is also how to ask ChatGPT, and it's a thing that we as adults are talking about. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are doing that research, because it's so valuable. Continue with what you were saying, and then I have another question.
No. I think like just to your point though, I mean, that's really where I think a lot of this stems from is, I mean, I would argue even in the past 5 years, there's been a massive surge of just various types of technology. But again, arguably you could go further than 5 years, but it's just incredible. And again, to really underscore your point, it kind of blows my mind how much has truly changed. And so in doing a study like this, that's really what I hope to find, is just comparing the two and really identifying and kind of targeting those competencies. Obviously specific for teachers of students with visual impairments, but again, arguably for anything. I mean, uh, you could really do lots of different studies specific to that technology piece.
And I can imagine that we can take the results from your study and take it to the gen ed teachers and say, hey, like this is what we have found to be like what's needed, or what they have or they don't have, or whatever you guys are saying. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about Lauren's backstory, a little bit about Ben's backstory. And Ben, I do apologize for saying your name incorrectly. We'll make sure that that's corrected. But how did you guys come to working together? What was that story?
Well, I'll start, Ben. So I've been dreaming, like I've always had O&M interns at camp, like from Florida. I mean, TVI's people from Florida, O&M from FS, like Stephen F. Austin from different universities, and so. But I wanted to make it a lot more formal, and I wanted them to get credit and attention. I want to get money. So I wrote a grant to not only pay for the interns' flights, the room and board, but give them a stipend and bring us all together and have it be a formal program. And then I was thinking, I want to document it. I want to do a qualitative study, but because Katie was the O&M, Katie Erickson was the O&M supervisor, and I'm directing the camp. So we could do the study, but we can't direct the study. We needed someone that was unbiased. And I didn't know Ben last year when we were putting this together. And so Katie suggested Ben, and I ran it by him, and he was so gung-ho about it. And so that's how we met. Like, I hired him to come and do the research with us, loved working with him. So we worked on the article, and then we all went to Iceland together, and luckily his wife, Megan, got to come as well. And it was just such a great collaboration. And now, we did this presentation for the conference. We just submitted our paper, yesterday, from this past summer. And so I think we're lifers, right, Ben?
Oh, 100%.
That we met because of this research, and we're going to continue the O&M program, not as a big a scale as last summer, but I want to continue that O&M piece of training O&Ms. I mean, it's a perfect setting sports and a university, and we went downtown Brockport. I mean, it's just a wonderful connection between O&M and physical activity. And we're going to continue down that path. I know Ben's passion is AT, but he's also really good at the physical activity piece because he's also an athlete himself.
Is that something that you look for when you're partnering with people, Lauren? Like a soft skill, somebody who's good at sports too, because this is a sports camp.
I think it's easiest to relate to the research that you're doing if you've been in those settings. I mean, having to navigate the locker room to the pool independently takes somebody who understands O&M and understands changing in a locker room and the nuances of trying to get out to the pool. So if you get somebody who's never really been into sports, then they're not going to see all the variables that need to be done. But it depends on the study. Like this summer, we're doing a huge project. I just got a $50,000 grant, Ben. I don't know if I told you, for a leadership program. So we're training all former campers who are blind and visually impaired how to be leaders. We're starting the training in March, and then at camp they're going to have a partner, and they're going to train one of the kids. Each one is going to train. So we have 15 leaders who are going to train 15 future leaders and be their mentors for the week. And I'm going to do a study in that area because I just want to see to them. I want to find out, like, how did you see yourself before this program? Did you see yourself as someone that other people would listen to? And so, like, and this is another, something else, Cassie, you were saying, like, you kind of go into it blind. Well, I don't see a lot of research on leadership and visual impairment. And so, but I know that there's a lack of people who are blind and visually impaired in leadership positions. And I don't think Perkins has ever had a person who's blind as the director or the president or anything like that. I mean, a lot of organizations, I'm sure. And so, and I've seen, like, at Perkins, I have had visually impaired, like, directors of programs or dorm supervisors or teachers. I know people are totally capable of being leaders, but the public doesn't always know that. So we need to teach them those skills and bring in people like Joe Strecce. I love Joe Strecce, and people who are leaders in the field that can come in and teach them their skills. How do you work with people and react when people have, like, microaggressions and things like that? And so that's what we're doing this summer. And we, like I said, we got two grants already. I have one more out there I'm waiting for, to do this big training, bringing in leaders and then training future leaders. Part of that piece is also O&M, because if you are dependent on other people, how are people going to look up to you? Knowing when you need help and knowing when you don't, but trying to be as independent as possible. Like, I am a big proponent of pre-teaching. We're also doing a lot of research on pre-teaching. If you go somewhere ahead of time, learn the facility, learn where the bathroom is, learn where the doors are and any barriers, you're going to be a lot more confident when you go there for the real thing.
Well, Lauren, I don't mean to jump in, but that's so incredible that's what that next piece will be, because I know, like, even in my line of work, the students that I serve, it's shifted a little bit, I would say, over the past probably 5 years to more of that high school piece. But we have kids that will go on to what we call the Independence Academy, but 18 through 21. And then obviously we do a bunch of things with transition and always thinking about that career education piece in the TSVI line of work. But I feel like that's one thing that we're constantly concerned about because of the significant challenges that they face. And I think even if we can set them up perfectly for success, there's still those barriers that they run into of they go to apply for a job. And again, not that you want it to be set up this way, but a lot of times you do have those implications where they're like, well, I don't know if you can necessarily do this, or there's a lot of that negative perception. So I think focusing on something where they can see themselves as leaders and see themselves doing these things, like, that is huge. Like, it gives me chills thinking about, because that's ultimately why I do my job. And something like this, that's huge, that we need more things like that, especially for when these students graduate and go out, whether they are college bound or they're going right into the workforce. But that piece is just huge. We wholeheartedly need more of that.
Well, and Ben, you brought up a good point, is that people in the community have to see people who are blind doing typical things independently, and then that's only when they're going to change their perceptions. But when kids who are blind were just at schools for the blind for years and years, my colleagues my age never saw people who are blind in their community because they were in segregated settings. And so my friends that are teaching, they're like, Lauren, I don't know how to teach kids with visual impairment. I never interacted, they never taught. When they taught, they never taught people who are blind. So that's why another reason to make all these training materials. But like, even this is recent. My department, because of camp, I've had a lot of college students in adapted physical education in our program. And my chair said to me at one point, you got to stop telling these people to come here because they're never going to get a job. All right, so you wanted me to tell you where they are? One of them's now a professor at Cortland, SUNY Cortland, another sister school, a professor in adapted physical education. Another one is in a doctoral program in University of South Carolina in adapted physical education. Another one is a teacher at Texas School for the Blind. So far, I have another student coming through right now with a visual impairment. So far, we've had a 100% success rate because they've been out there showing people what they can do, learning from each other. I mean, unfortunately, the first student that came through our program had a bigger learning curve for the faculty than the ones that came behind her. But that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. We're going to change perceptions, and it's going to have that trickle-down effect for that next generation. My perception is that this first generation that went through camp abilities, like the first 10 years of camp, it was hard. When they were on a track team or they were on a swim team, they were on the news just for making the team. And it made me cringe because that shouldn't be news, that a kid who's blind is running across country. But I'm happy to say that now, especially in our part of New York, Section 5, there's lots of kids with visual impairments on the swim team, cross country, track teams, soccer teams, and it's not news. It's normal. That's what I want.
Yeah. And there is scientific data that links sports with efficacy skills and leadership, right? And so that has been long standing. There's a reason that people want to put their kids in sports and not just do the academic. Lauren, I love what you're doing here with camp abilities, in that this seems to be the camp might have started off as like a camp. I want them involved in the sports, but now it's also your playground for creating leaders and doing the research to prove your hypotheses. And I'm not just talking about leaders as in the people and the students going through the program, but also the O&M specialists. You're creating an avenue that is so needed for people to get their internships done, but also in like this really fun, great, unique setting. Because your setting that you do your internship in doesn't exactly have to match the classroom setting. You'll be able to take all those skills that you learned, and O&M is also about like adapting to your environment and to what's going on, and what better way to do that than at a camp like this. But one thing that I really love is giving our students leadership skills makes it so that they have to have not only the hard skills of having conversations and what an organization, but the soft skills of believing in yourself. And I don't know if you guys have ever read, there's this book called 10X is Easier Than 2X, which basically the premise of it is that when you go for big goals, if you want to 10X yourself instead of 2Xing or yourself or a project, it takes an identity shift. And that's what stepping into a leadership role does. And one of the reasons that our profession is struggling is because not as many people as we need are stepping into leadership roles. And part of that is because we don't believe in ourselves. So think about all of the TVIs and O&Ms who are then getting those students, right? They send their students off to you, and then the students come back acting like leaders. Who's going to have to step up? the TVIs and the O&Ms who may not have had those soft skills of believing in themselves, but in order to lead those students who are now budding leaders, they then get to step up into that role too. And I find that right when you were talking, Lauren and Ben, I was like, man, that is going to have such a ripple effect on our profession, because how much we learn so much from our students. When my first student who wanted a guide dog, he was a little too young for one, but we got him all the skills for it, and it was his drive that I was like, okay, you want a guide dog, you graduate in this many years, you need to be able to do XYZ, da 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 da. And he ran with it, but I was like running to catch up with his growth, right? And I was the one who was like, oh my God, what's next? Oh my God, how do I do this? Oh my God, I've never had a student like work so hard. And like now I have to run to catch up with him because he had that belief in his self. And he did. He left the school that I was at. He went home. He got a guide dog. Great. He had the skills. It was fantastic. I know. But I remember that feeling of like, oh God, like me trying to keep up with him. And I love the fact that you're going to do that same thing for TVIs and O&Ms around the country and possibly around the world, depending on how far you take this program. All to say, I think that what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. Is it a big challenge to run a program like that, you guys?
We should call it raising the bar. Like your point is true. Like if your students are more skilled than you thought they were going to be, you have to hone in on having like a bigger challenge for yourself to raise them to the next level. That's a really good point. The challenge is, well, because I also wrote this other line that we're doing this summer. We started last summer. Ben saw is blind tennis. Blind tennis is taking off in other countries, and our country's starting. USTA now has United States Blind Tennis, USBTA, the United States Blind Tennis Association. So we just are getting a grant to create the manual with US Blind Tennis Association and an assessment. And so we're helping USTA implement and promote and spread blind tennis. If we get this grant, which we should, we're going to give other camp abilities the equipment, and we're going to give them money for the specialist for their camps. We're going to teach more kids how to do blind tennis. And my vision is that blind tennis is going to be part of Paralympics, and these kids that are in these camps now will be part of that program. And so it's taking off. Like we're having blind tennis at our camp again this summer. We actually have a mini camp in February. At the end of February, we're going to have another mini camp. And some of the kids loved it and some of them hated it. I think it is hard if you think about it, because of it's actually more than three-dimensional. Like goal ball is all on the ground, so that you don't have that other aspect of being in the air. But also you have the tactile lines on the floor. You know where to throw it. Blind tennis is so different. And it's actually great for O&M because you have to concentrate so much harder on not just hitting the ball, but also hitting it back to where it came from, if it came from the other side. So it has been a really, and I played tennis in college. I taught tennis for years, and it's a challenge for me to play and to teach it. And so talk about raising the bar. I'm raising the bar because beat baseball there's not going to be as many opportunities. There's no equipment. I don't see a future in beat baseball. I mean, honestly, you can't buy beat baseballs or beat baseball bases right now. And I as much as the kids like it, it's just, are they going to ever get to play it? And so blind tennis has a huge future. USTA is putting a lot of time and energy and money into it, and I think it's going to grow. And so that's one of our other pushes. So I guess my challenge is juggling not just camp, but this grant and that grant and all the research and all the books. By the way, the Physical Education and Sport book through APH second edition is coming out this April or May. It's a second edition of our Physical Education and Sport book. So just juggling all these things plus a full-time job is a little bit daunting sometimes.
One thing I would say, though, I guess give yourself a pat on the back. As an outsider, so this past summer was the first time that I'd ever been to a Camp Abilities full stop. I had not been to any anyone, I mean, across country or anything like that. But one thing that I think in the 30 years, this will be the 30th year coming up
Mhm.
next summer, correct,
Mhm.
Lauren?
Yeah. Mhm.
The thing that I think everybody has done such a phenomenal job with, and kind of to answer your question too, Cassie, about just running something like this, I think that overall idea of that top-down approach, so like Lauren as the director, but she's done such a phenomenal job of putting key people in positions to help manage and kind of facilitate everything. So obviously we have that research component, but again, those researchers that are coming in, they know what they're doing, they know what's expected. We have kind of a meeting prior to camp so everybody's on the same page. But then employing the APE or the adaptive physical education specialists and having each individual one running various sports, whether it's swimming or tennis or all of those pieces. So that's in place. And then below that, you have kind of that one-on-one where you have a coach and the athlete working together. And so everything is so streamlined at this point that while yes, from again, as an outsider point of view, especially me coming in when as a researcher, it's you really have to take a step back and just almost marvel at how amazing this is because it is a very the best way I can describe it is a very well-oiled machine down to the scheduling and all of the different pieces that have to go into making something this successful, especially when you think about I don't think Lauren's mentioned this past camp we had was it 50 almost 60 athletes in total. So I mean, there's a lot of participants, and they all are afforded a plethora of opportunities throughout the week, and it's pretty well packed from the time they get up at about 6:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, it is go go go. But again, it takes a village to make this happen, and so I think there's a tremendous amount to be said about any of these camps that have been set up because it's while yes, Lauren is definitely the backbone to all of this and to making this happen. But I think again, she's done such a phenomenal job, and everybody like coming together and making it as successful as it is because everybody works so well together. And I think also too, even from that O&M standpoint, that was a big takeaway that I had even thinking from like a multidisciplinary standpoint of being able to work with like the PE teachers here in Lincoln. That's not something that I mean. Obviously, that's something that I've always been. It's been on my radar of things that we can kind of collaborate with for students and things like that. But this, I think, really kind of opens the doors for, especially for those interns, being able to see how well uh, that we can work together with all of the different providers. It doesn't have to simply just be something that you're taking on by yourself. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that piece as well. And the other part too, that early intervention, right? So targeting things when kids are younger as opposed to waiting until they're in middle school or high school before we're thinking about physical activity or again, arguably anything. But I think that's another big piece to that as well.
Yeah, actually, Ben, I wanted to mention one of the days of camp, we call it Camp Can Do. And we have the little ones come in, and the kids who are little, like 4 and 5 up to 8, because they're not allowed to come overnight till they're 9. And so they come just for the day. And then the parents usually stay with them and they get partnered with an older athlete and they just get to try everything. And it's just so cute because they're like, most of them never did most of the sports before. And the whole idea is that, oh, I can do this. And when I get old enough, I can come for the whole week. And I've had some kids, like one kid, he came and he was in Camp Can Do. And at his school, I think he was 7 at the time. At his school, they had to do a poster, one of those trifold things about something. He did a whole poster on camp abilities. He'd been there for one day, and then he came through, and he until he was 18, and he's such a leader and just an amazing athlete on his track team, cross country team. And, this was one of those cases where they actually told him he couldn't be on the cross country team, proved them wrong, and ran in his races and came in some of the top tier runners. So yeah, I love the Camp Can Do aspect. And Ben's right. I mean, we need to have more programs with little kids. I agree. But when we have our mini camp, because it's only one day, we do take little kids in that.
That is just, oh, that's so beautiful. I want to move the conversation just a little bit to what you guys are going to be presenting on during your bonus presentation at the O&M Symposium. We've talked a little bit about how well your interns have done. Do you guys want to share a little bit about that?
The biggest piece that we wanted to really hone in on, obviously, I would say any of the programs that are across the country, if students are working toward the ACVREP certification to become a comms, they have to go through the 350-hour internship program. And Katie, or she's now a doctoral candidate, but Katie Erickson was kind of the one between Lauren and Katie that developed the idea. But the main thing we wanted to look at was to see what kind of opportunities are out there as far as ways in which that students gain these hours. I know me personally, my experience was very different than even some of the interns that I had the opportunity to work with this past summer. And so that in of itself is very interesting, just because, again, a lot of times when, at least from the research that we have, students that are going back to school to get their, whether it's certification as a comms or really anything, oftentimes they're already working, whether it be as a teacher or they're working full time. So it's very, very difficult to, whether it's find time during the day or you have to take time off from work. There's a lot of different reasons as to why it becomes very challenging to gain these hours. So we wanted to look for, again, a very meaningful way where they could try to get a pretty big chunk of hours during this week-long camp through Campabilities. And we, throughout the week, I guess, how much, I should ask too, do you want me to go into quite a bit of detail about the research itself, or are there specific things that you're interested in too that I can maybe kind of talk through more than anything, I guess?
Yeah, so specifically because this is going to be a YouTube video, we don't need to go into all of the research. They'll get that at the symposium. But my question that I think other people would be having is, if I'm going to do my O&M internship and I'm like a candidate, right? I'm going through my O&M program, and yes, I am having difficulty finding where I'm going to pull these hours from, or having to leave my family or things of that nature. Do you guys work with a plethora of different schools, or do you only work with certain schools? How does that work?
Well, I sent out the call to probably at least 8 or 10 different universities. And the ones that reached it was the University of Kentucky and Portland State, where the students came from this time. But I also have a limited number. I mean, people might have wanted to come later, but it was closed because I started off with a small number. And I'm like, okay, I'll just take one more. I'll just take one more. And I think we had 7 altogether, right, Ben? No, yeah, 7 altogether, which worked out great. And they were a nice little cohort, and hopefully they made some friends because they were from different states. Actually, 3 of them were from Hawaii. And now they're going to have the Campabilities in Hawaii because they came here. I mean, the snowball effect. And actually, I heard they're going to have Campabilities in Kentucky too. And so it did, the snowball effect, or the ripple effect, was really helpful. So yeah, but I mean, I think some of the students do their hours at the camps closer to their school, because now there's so many camps in the US. You could do all your practicum hours at different camps closer to where you live.
Well, and the other thing too, and I apologize for going into too much detail, that's my fault. The other thing, I guess, that is interesting, or a thing to think about for something along these lines, I guess I had not, if I think about even my own personal experience, I was really unaware that this would be an opportunity, right? And so I think that would be something in and of itself, for kind of like Lauren had mentioned. I mean, start at your state and local level to see what camps are available during the summertime. Obviously, I mean, there is always that chance that you might have to travel a little bit, but I think this gives students that are currently in their program that opportunity to start thinking about what are my internship hours going to look like, because again, it's going to be very different and unique for each individual in their own circumstances. But I think it definitely allows us to kind of think outside of the box of ways in which that we can get hours and be very intentional with that more than anything.
And can I add, the other benefit too is that when our teachers, physical education, adapted physical education, are out in the field, they're going to be on the multidisciplinary team with TVIs, with O&Ms. They need to learn how to work together. What are their responsibilities? What do they do? And just seeing them work together and sharing what the acronyms mean in their field and what's the terminology and the directions and the strategies, the tactile teaching strategies. I mean, they work as a team. So it's going to be seamless when they get out there and they have to work with each other. They're not going to be like, what do you do? Who are you? Which happens all the time. I see it when I'm out of school. I mean, I remember I was at a school last year, March. The PE teacher didn't meet the TVI until March. So that child had been without support most of the year. And now they're going to know what each other does. They're going to understand their roles and not be afraid to connect. And that's what I love about this. And I've actually connected with other camps that have, one of them has an OT internship and one of them has a speech and language internship. So folding in the multidisciplinary team members is so smart if we're really training future teachers, which is one of our goals.
Would you like to share where they can get more information? We've already shared the Camp Abilities website, but is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, so campabilities.org is our website about camp, but that's also where you can get information about, it's called educational materials. So on the top, there's a link to educational materials. And then there's also a link to the Camp Abilities story, and it'll give you a link to buy the book through SUNY Press. It's also an audio download, a free audio download. You can give a donation to camp if you want. But so you can get, so campabilities.org. But we also have a website, campabilitiesworld.com, which is about all of our camps all over the world. And there's profiles of people in different camps, and it's a really cool website. But if you're interested at all in seeing the side and what sports can bring to kids with visual impairment, blindness, deafblindness, come to Camp Abilities, be part of our family, and learn and grow with us, because it's like we're always growing and you never know where it's going to take you. It could take you to Iceland. I'm going to Bangladesh, and Colorado Camp Abilities is going to be new, and there's lots of camps all over the world that you can be part of, or start your own if you don't have one in your area.
Lovely. Well, thank you both so much for coming on this podcast. It was incredible to hear about all these things and to learn from both of you. Before you go, real quick, do you have a piece of advice to help our community take a step forward to being better professionals?
I would just say, have high expectations. Don't minimize what kids with visual impairment can do, because it's just a visual impairment. It doesn't affect their body. And so if they've had a lack of opportunity or lack of support from family and teachers, they might not be able to do what their peers are doing. But that doesn't mean they don't have that potential. They're all born with that potential. So we have to have high expectations and patience when it comes to teaching kids with visual impairments. And if you read my book, the Camp Abilities storybook, you'll see so many times when I even not intentionally had low expectations, and the kids taught me, I just need a little more time. I know I can do this. And you see them grow, and it's worth the time and effort.
And then I would say, this is something that I firmly believe in, and I know it's something that you probably hear quite often, but just the power of collaboration. That's something that I find more and more, even obviously outside of my doctoral program, but I think just in general. And kind of as we've talked about throughout on this podcast, I think the more that we can be intentional with working with other service providers and really honing those things into how we can make things better for our students, but also better for ourselves as being lifelong learners and all of those pieces. But I think put yourself out there and give yourself those opportunities to talk with other people and to learn what they do, ask questions. I think that's definitely something that's helped me personally significantly. And so I think the more that we can have those positive conversations, the better.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast.